Are you a fearful, avoidant, attachment style individual who feels like you are constantly prioritizing other people's feelings ahead of your own? Who feels like you constantly are not seen and heard and understood in your relationships the way you're desperately always trying to see and hear and understand where other people are coming from? And does this lead you over time to start feeling resentful and eventually kind of implode your relationships at times, or feel like you get so bottled up with anger that you just need to erupt and like push people away because you're done with feeling taken advantage of or hurt? If you relate to any of these things, you might actually be struggling with enmeshment trauma. And I made a separate full video all about enmeshment, and I'll go through it at like a very high level here, but we can think of enmeshment trauma as the pain of being so focused for survival purposes, not necessarily in your adult life, but as a child, you sort of learned this, so focused on people's emotions around you that as a byproduct of it, the traumatic part that took place was that you lost connection to yourself. And so it becomes really difficult to actually feel your own feelings in real time when you're around other people because you're too busy trying to pick up on everything that they are feeling. Now, enmeshment trauma, so think of enmeshment first and foremost as basically not knowing emotionally what someone else is feeling versus what you're feeling. It's almost like in a dynamic, you're feeling other people's emotions more than your own. And this is usually the result of growing up in some kind of environment where relationships became really unsafe. And as a way of just trying to deal with that, you learned, okay, well, I have to basically take on what everybody else is going through and see what they're feeling and see what their mood is like. So I can kind of, weave through the different chaos that's taking place and try to keep myself safe. Now, enmeshment trauma can be the result of like a very chaotic environment, but can also be the result of like direct trauma around feelings, where you were shamed for your feelings, you were made to feel like your feelings shouldn't matter, you were punished if you had boundaries, emotional boundaries, any kind of boundaries. And so you learned that your own boundaries, your own sense of like domain of where you end and other people begin is not allowed. And as a result of that, it's almost like your identity bleeds into the emotions and the relationship with others. And this is a huge part of like what also leads to codependent behaviors long-term, then feeling like you have to caretake for other people, and feeling like you're responsible for them and have to show up and all these different dynamics. And so as a fearful avoidance specifically, you usually struggle with more direct enmeshment. And in your adult life, what this actually leads to is you usually feeling like your feelings don't matter, you come last, it's not okay to have boundaries, feeling unseen, feeling unheard, and it can be a really painful experience to relationships, but it actually doesn't have to be this way. So what I want to take you through for a moment is some ways of overcoming this enmeshed dynamic, and a huge part of healing that has a lot to do with like getting back in touch with your actual feelings. So if we could break enmeshment down into a few sort of subcategories of what's actually going on, now that you sort of understand the roots of it, think of it as like the moment you're around people, you get out of touch with your own emotions. And again, you may actually find that you struggle to be in touch with your emotions, not just when you're around people, sometimes in other areas of life. Like sometimes you avoid your emotions when you come home from work and you're tired for the day, you just kind of numb out or just watch TV mindlessly, or like avoid feeling your emotions and feel this overarching feeling of numbness. You may find that you put lots of pressure on yourself and don't even realize that there's a lot of things that come out of enmeshment. But basically, part of healing is learning to get back in touch with your own emotions. And emotions often feel scary to those of us that have been enmeshed for a long period of time. It can feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm sort of overwhelmed. And sometimes we can even feel like a sense of guilt for prioritizing our own feelings or making time for ourselves, or not spending all of our waking effort and energy just caretaking for others. But ultimately, until you do this, until you actually get in touch with your own emotions, it's going to be really hard to have functional relationships, because if you don't know what you feel, it's hard to know what you need. It's hard to know what your preferences are. It's hard to know what your yeses and nos are in real time. It's hard to know what your boundaries are, what's okay with you and not okay with you. And what's going to end up happening is you'll usually end up agreeing to things that you don't actually want, saying yes when you mean no because you didn't feel what your yes and no was in real time. You'll end up violating your own boundaries by accident in many different areas of life, at work and friendships, family relationships, romantic partnerships. Like you'll see a lot of these things arise. And then because we don't realize that we're enmeshed a lot of the time, it's like an unknown, right? Because it's your comfort zone since, years and years and years for most people when they grow up enmeshed. Then what happens is you feel like, wow, why doesn't anybody care about me? Like, what about my feelings? And usually it's because people don't know what you're feeling, because a lot of times they expect you to tell them. And it's almost like you're playing by different rules. And again, you can think of like fearful avoidance and enmeshment as sort of like, these are the rules you learned relationships are supposed to be, played by, right? Like this is how it's supposed to go. But in a secure, functional relationship, we communicate feelings, we talk about our needs, we set boundaries, we're in touch with our feelings in real time. And unfortunately, when you go through trauma, some of that is stripped away. And that's not your fault. But it is something that you can change if you want to put the work into it. So, in overarching themes, and I have a course you can check out for free on enmeshment, trauma, and codependency. And we actually break it down and talk about some of the ways it impacts different attachment styles. And again, you can check it out for free for 7 days using the link below. And it says PDS All Access Pass, and actually gives you access to every single course we have, but go into the enmeshment one if this is what you want to work on. And you'll see like this course takes you through a lot more in depth of these steps, but at a high level, you have to get reattuned to your own feelings. If you are somebody who's like, yeah, that's me, I'm really out of alignment, I don't really know my feelings when I'm around other people, getting back in touch with that will change the entire trajectory of your life forever, because you'll know how to say yes, how to say no. You'll know what's true for you or not true for you. And what happens, which is a really painful byproduct of enmeshment, and it's unfortunate, is that, if you don't know what you actually want to agree to or not agree to in real time, or you don't know if you're not sure, to be able to say, hey, I'm not sure about that yet, let me get back to you. You end up in a situation where you're violating yourself so often without ever even realizing or meaning to. And you long-term feel very disrespected by other people, right? You're like, why don't people respect my boundaries? Why don't people respect my needs? Or you won't realize that you're upset about something until many, many, many things have happened. And then all of a sudden it's like, you realize and have this big realization, like, oh my goodness, I've been, feeling taken advantage of in all these different ways. And it just reaches your conscious mind when you come to this like huge tipping point. And by then you usually feel betrayed and like there's too much emotion to process, right? Like there's all these things that I wasn't paying attention to, and you can feel very violated, and it's not a nice feeling. So, being able to recognize your own feelings ahead of time, to be attuned to yourself in real time, you can still attune to others, but you'll learn to kind of go back and forth more quickly of what this person might need and then where you're at, how you feel about it. And it also opens the doorway for you to be able to negotiate your needs, which is the next part of like not acting on the enmeshed feelings, right? So being able to get attuned to your own feelings, learn more about your own needs and get into like harmony with those, and then reprogram beliefs that are connecting you back to this idea of enmeshment. Like, I'm responsible for how other people feel, or I have to show up in a certain way. And so by freeing yourself of that, or like, I'm a bad person if I'm not caretaking for others at all times, or there's a lot of different enmeshed beliefs. They're in the course. It's a codependency and enmeshment course together. So it also will address like the different behaviors that you may take on when you're feeling enmeshed. And by doing this and working through these things, your life will change. You'll feel like your relationships change. You'll feel like actually seen and known. You won't feel taken advantage of so much. You'll feel like, oh, I can get my needs met through other people because I'm making space to communicate them and talk about them. And these are very powerful things for the overall ability to thrive in relationships. And it's a part of what a securely attached relationship naturally has within it. So a huge, huge thing to work on. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them below. And that's it for this video today. Thank you so much for watching and for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and you hang out here. I'd really appreciate it. And I will see you in the next video.